Hey Emma, hope you're feeling better. Here's a brief video of what we're going to be doing today in class. Let me see. Oh shoot, I wanted to get. I guess I want to get the schedule up, and I thought I had it up, but it looks like I closed it. Here we go. Um, of course, you can keep track of the schedule yourself, and you should be. And the key thing is that today I'm going to go over introductions and conclusions. I'm going to give a handout on visual aids, but I don't think I'm going to go over it today. I will attach both those. Those are both from handouts. I'll attach those to my email to you. And there is no group information organizational exercise, but there is a SPS exercise being assigned. So I guess the sort of topics are involved in this. They're in the header, but not exactly. Was do this class and do today. If there's any way for you to get it to me, perhaps drop by my office, drop it at my door. Study Guide 1 is due. Right? Study Guide 1 is due today. So it's due for you also. If you're able to walk, if you hopefully you're feeling well enough to be walking around campus a little bit, walk past and drop on my door, that'd be great. You're supposed to have read Chapter 8 for today, which is for Study Guide 2. You have Study Guide 2 and you should be working on it. And the key thing, though, of course, is the etymology or name presentation. So you need to be working on, have already completed that and be ready to practice it. Maybe you don't feel well enough to go to practice sessions tonight. Hopefully you will tomorrow, or in the latest on Thursday. I'll go over those in a minute. But at least practice it for yourself. For next class, you need to work on the SPS exercise. You will have 1 week to do that. It's going to be due in 1 week, and it involves you having to come up with 4. I'll show you that in a minute. And then it says read chapter 9. So we're going to push on into the chapters that will go with Study Guide 2. And next class, though, of course, is the etymology name presentation. You bring a rubric to class. Must be practiced with teaching assistant twice before class, as usual. You should be working on Study Guide 2. And one more thing about the rubric, I'll go over in a minute here. About the etymology name presentation. I'll go over that in a moment. So let's take a look at that. Speech coaching, okay? Oh, by the way, one thing you'll miss is Aiden is going to be doing his etymology name presentation, but you already saw Natalie's, which is a very good example, so you should be all set for that. Same times and days for speech coaching as before. This time I've asked the TAs to really look for you to have some structure. I went over the structure, how the introduction really is built, 3 main ideas, and a definite conclusion. Again, it's 3 minutes, plus or minus 30 seconds, so that's the timing. Practice it yourself, practice it with the TAs, shoot for all that. Oh, it says quotation presentation day. That's not right. It's etymology. Presentation day is Thursday. Yes, you need to complete the coaching sessions and bring your rubric to class. But the other thing is the interview transcript is due at presentation. Or before, you could put it on Moodle. Remember, you were required to do a family interview. You might have done more than one, but at least I need the transcript from one. Essentially just questions and answers that you got. It doesn't have to be that long, but it should definitely be obvious that you did talk to somebody in your family for the how you got your name story. That's printed, typed, and printed out, brought with you to the presentation day, or put on Moodle. There is a Dropbox there for it. Either way, that's at the start of class, essentially. So that's when it's due. And that will be graded as part of your presentation. Okay, so there's that. What else? I'm going to put on the board this, where did I put it? I'm going to put on the board something I did put on the board before. And it's this file here. And let me just go to view. Let's just go to 200%. Here it is. And I've used this before, but I've added to it now. Here's the idea. You're going to have I'm assigning an exercise for you. The specific purpose statement exercise. The idea is that you've seen me come up with SPSs and put them on the board. You've looked at them yourselves or in groups and made corrections in them and so on. You've also now have the information about how we label the SPS and how we give organizational patterns for the for the CT and the main ideas. Okay. My handout to you, and this I'm looking at it now. This is not exactly the right handout. It is due a week from today. The handout I'm giving to everyone, it says 4 informative speeches. Research 4 informative speeches. And you have 4 sets of specific purpose statements, matching central thesis and main ideas. So in other words, you have to come up with 4 speech ideas. Okay? And I'll make sure I send you an attachment, the correct one. I just brought up the wrong one. Only 4 speech ideas. 1 object, SPS, 1 process, SPS, 1 event, SPS, and 1 concept, SPS. So they have to be 1 of each of those. Okay. You're not going to give these presentations, but I really want you to write out the full SPS, write out the full central thesis, label each of those, label the SPS of which it is, object, process, event, or concept. Then the central thesis, give the organizational pattern, topical, chronological, spatial, or causal. You don't have to have each one of those. They might all be topical, they might all be chronological or something, right? Okay. Then write the main ideas using Roman numerals, complete sentences, signposted, consistent language throughout. There's a lot of repetition in these 1, 2, and 3. Then here's the key additional thing. Provide at least 2 sources that address the need to know step. Recall that the need to know step is informative speaking is part of your introduction. So I'm going to be going over that to some degree in class today, the idea of the need to know step, but you need to actually list sources that you would have used for this presentation, sources that make sense with this presentation, perhaps sources that helped you come up with the main idea topics also. But you don't have to give them specifically sources that you've used, and we're going to write them in a specific way though, as APA citations. And you can see this figure 7.4 on page 130, and I think I will be including that as an attachment though also. That gives you examples from your textbook. This is from your textbook about what this APA format is and how it works. So 4 sets. Each one has a SPS, central thesis, main ideas, and 2 sources. And the 4 are divided up into object, process, event, and concept. And those are due in 1 week on paper. We're going to bring them on paper to class. We're going to be using them on paper in class that day. Okay. So this is a somewhat involved assignment. There's not that many, and you don't have to do the presentations and fully research them or make all the notes and so on. It's just those points, but they have to have some thought involved in them. Okay. Demonstrating this, I will put this on the board again to show you what an SPS looks like. I've used one many times before, and label it. In this case, it's an object. What a central thesis looks like, and then you give the organizational pattern. Remember, object, we have to have concept, object, process, event. But the organizational patterns, it doesn't matter to me if they're all topical or all whatever, chronological or something. Main ideas, Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3, or maybe 4 and 5, or maybe just 1 and 2, whatever, however many you have. List the main ideas, use the same language that you started with the SPS, you use that same language in the CT, use that same language and fully write out the main ideas, even though it's repetition, repetition, repetition. Then the sources. You may have to fudge the exact formatting a little bit. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. Is this just a website? Was it actually also a newspaper article, and so on? Do your best to, in general, keep the formatting, the APA formatting, and do your best to keep it. And these are just 2 sources that I could have used for this salmon thing here. So there are the sources, and I will show this in class. Okay. Now, so you got that assignment, and you got this sample here, okay? Now I'm going to go over the beginning and ending your presentation. This applies to your entomology presentation, your naming presentation, but also future ones, the idea of introductions and how important they are. I'm going to give you this handout. I won't read through the whole thing for you, but I ask you to please read through it carefully. You will need this information for your study guide also. Tips for the introduction, the idea of don't start talking until you get to the front of the room, and really have that good pause, get physically set before you begin is so important. If you can get your introduction off to a good start, you have a very good chance of having a very good presentation for the whole thing. This applies to entomology, but then to later presentations too. Here's something, speaking of just saying avoid starting, really have the words ready that you're going to say at the start of your presentation. They should be real words, okay? Don't start with fillers or cliches. Don't say, I'm here to talk about, hi, my name is so-and-so, I think you should hear about this thing I'm going to say. Start with the real attention-getting devices. Have a good long pause, look up at the audience, then start with real words, the real introduction, the real presentation, not fillers or cliches or something else to sort of jam in there. It's a real thing. Now, you do not have to say hello, give a personal greeting or a thank you or anything like that. If you're ever in a speaking situation where you did that, remember that is not part of your introduction. You would do that first and then pause, then begin the real speech. All right? And this whole thing about not walking during your introduction, I am not a good example of this. I do move around the classroom a lot, but I have to talk a lot longer than you, and I'm trying to keep attention, right? But I do think steadiness, especially during the introduction, is important. Attention-getting devices, we've gone over some of these before. This is what I want to go over a little bit with you here. I have a full list of them here, or a long list of them. These you will need for your study guide, but you also need them for your entomology naming presentation, and you need them for future presentations. Rhetorical question, that's one that you've seen before and may have used before, and you certainly heard people use it before, right? So if we say something like, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? That would be a rhetorical question. People are not feeling like they have to answer that exactly. It's a question that doesn't not require a direct response. It just makes people think. Okay. Then I might go on to give a presentation about trees and how important they are, or something, or how trees can help us get out of global warming, or something like that. That may have been how I started that way. Remember, in your entomology naming presentation, you need at least 2 attention-getting devices that you start with. Quotations, I won't belabor that one. You've already done a quotation. I think that's a great way to start off, get attention. Suspense, well, how would that work? Imagine, say something like this. You're about to start your presentation. You get up there, you stand there, and you say, you're in a pitch black room. You feel lost. Suddenly, there's a light. What you're experiencing is what it's like for someone who suddenly loses their vision. And that light that might look like a pinprick might actually be the sun. That would be a presentation about sudden vision loss, more of a medical kind of a thing. But we start with suspense, arouse curiosity. We need to solve it relatively soon. Startling statements, you could say, when the engine exploded and the cockpit filled with smoke, my only thought was, how can I survive this? Well, how can you survive a plane crash? Here, there's actually I have some good advice for you if you ever find yourself in that situation. First, we will talk about whatever. So that would have been both a startling statement and a rhetorical question. Sometimes there is some gray area between these, and sometimes a suspense thing. You think of suspense might actually be startling statement, but startling statement, get attention, don't overdo it. We don't alarm the audience, but we might want to surprise them. You could also make it a startling statement might be a statistic about 90% of people your age are something other likely to get disease or something. That is probably not true, a certain disease, but a statistic which is alarming and surprising might work too. It might be just a very strong statement. Reference to occasion is not good, is good to know about, but doesn't really help us very much. Like if you were going to talk about a birthday party, like an anniversary party or a wedding or something like that, there would be a reference to the occasion. Reference to a previous speaker. If you're kind of in a situation where you and other speakers are working together doing something, or you're following another speaker on the same topic, that makes more sense than our classroom. Personal reference, though, a personal story, a revelation about yourself, that can be effective, but don't tell us things you don't want us to know. Humor is a great attention getter. It can be hard to do, but if you can do it, it's fantastic. Visual aids, in fact, I'm giving you a handout on visual aids. I may go over it a little bit in class. I won't go over it here in this video. I'll attach it here. You'll need the information for your study guide. I will go over it in more detail and show you some visual aids in the future. But showing people physical things or posters definitely can be an attention-getting device. Real or hypothetical illustrations. You might want to avoid some of the cliched things like close your eyes and imagine, or imagine yourself in this situation. But you do just tell them the situation. It might be a real situation. It might be a hypothetical. This might be some overlap with startling, or some overlap with perhaps suspense. However, that kind of illustrative story get people's attention. And then finally, music and movement. If you can sing or dance and it makes sense in your presentation, you're not just doing it gratuitously, or do something else, some other movement. You know, if you were doing a presentation about weightlifting, you might start off with imagining you had some weights and actually showing us weightlifting form or something. Music and movement can definitely catch attention. So those are some attention-getting devices, and you should think about how you're going to use those in your presentation. Finally, conclusions. We often don't spend enough time preparing the conclusion. And sometimes even when you've prepared one, by the time you get to this part of your speech, you're just ready to end. But do pay attention to your conclusion in your entomology name presentation and the future ones. It does signal the end. These are the 3 ways we do that. We begin with a double pause. Hopefully there's been some pauses throughout, perhaps as you move from one main idea to another. Certainly at the very beginning of your presentation. But before you start your conclusion, you should have a double pause, really pause before that, and then you start your conclusion. You slow down and change your tone just before that, right? It's because we're signaling the end, and then you likely refer back to the introduction or something in the introduction, perhaps to one of those attention-getting devices or something. You should signal the end without cliches. You don't say in conclusion and summary to sum up, even though I just said conclusion, in conclusion. Just give us the information. Avoid those cliches. You need to go back over your main ideas, but not so much give a summary of the same thing as you did in the previous statement. It's more trying some other language to make it fresh, but still verbalize those important main ideas again. You're hoping that, if nothing else, people remember those main ideas. And then it'd be nice if you had some of a clincher, a last line that will make your speech memorable. If you don't have someone, consider using a quotation. Maybe you find a quotation, probably not repeating the same one you used before unless you have some comment to make on it, but maybe you find some other quotation that really helps to sum things up. So that's the starting and ending your presentation. And let's see, is that about all I wanted to go over today? The schedule, SPS exercise handout, and talking about the starting and ending, and then giving everybody a number of handouts. Okay, that's about it. Ask me any questions, and again, hopefully you're feeling better. And hoping I will see you in next class, and you'll be ready to give your presentation.